Hey guys, welcome to our devotional series from the book of Philippians. Today we're going to be looking at Philippians chapter 1 verses 12 to 18. So wherever you are, whatever you're doing right now, why don't you pause this video, go and grab a Bible and then come back and we can read together. So I'm going to read Philippians chapter 1 verses 12 to 18. Paul writes this. He says, "Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defence of the gospel. But the former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I'm in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice." Now let's just remember where Paul has come from so far. He's writing to the people in Philippi. He's really thankful for them. He considers it joy that they are partners in the gospel. And his prayer for them, and subsequently Paul's prayer for us, is that we would abound more and more in love and in knowledge and wisdom that comes from the grace of Jesus. Now, I don't know about you, but in this time of distance and isolation from people, I've really learned to count my blessings, to be thankful for the small things, like, for example, having a house to live in, still being able to get out just once a day, actually having a back garden, and having a little front garden that I can get out and talk to my neighbours in. Those are things that I'm really thankful for during this time. Now, it's important to remember, and now more than ever, in the book of Philippians, to remind ourselves the context in which Paul is writing. See, remember that Paul is writing from prison. He's writing literally in chains in his cell, and he's writing to the people of God in Philippi. So Paul understands the whole isolation and distancing thing. And even among that, Paul is able to be thankful to God for the Philippians. He's able to consider it joy that they are partners, even during this time. And from verses 12 and onwards, Paul shares two things specifically, and both these things have unexpected outcomes. Now, the first of which is what he's talking about, how even though he's been in prison, the gospel is still spreading. He says, "I want you to know that what has happened to me," in other words, even being in prison, it's actually served to advance the gospel. How? Because it's obvious that as he's preaching in prison, he's in chains for serving Jesus. And so even though Paul is in confinement, he's in isolation, he's distanced from people because he's in prison, because he's being so bold for Jesus, the gospel is advancing. God's kingdom is growing. And that's the unexpected outcome of Paul's situation. The situation is that he's in prison. The unexpected outcome is that it's growing. And for me, during this time of distancing and isolation, one really great thing is that I've been able to talk to my neighbours about Jesus. They know, for example, that I'm a key worker, that I work for a church, and they're asking questions about that. See, even now, the gospel is spreading. Even when Paul was in confinement in prison, the gospel is spreading. And for me, even while we're in isolation and distancing, the gospel is spreading. Now, the second thing that Paul talks about in verses 15 to 18 is that some preaching Christ out of different motives. But he says the unexpected outcome here, he says, what does it matter whether people preach Christ out of false motives or true? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, Paul is able to rejoice, remember, even in prison. So for us, in this time of distancing and isolation, we can take great encouragement from Paul in prison, because even then the gospel still spreads and God's kingdom still spreads. Friends, during this time, we can be certain that God is still on the throne, that God is not distancing himself from us. God is not isolating himself from us. He draws near to us at a time of isolation when everyone else feels distance. And friends, God is still growing his church. His kingdom is still spreading. And guess what? We get to be a part of that. So during this time, why not find a space, find somewhere where you can be part of the spreading of the gospel. Chat to your neighbours about Jesus. Drop an encouraging note round someone. Be an encouragement to someone. Send scripture to someone. We get to be part of the gospel spreading during this time. And Paul wants us to know that even during this time of confinement, the gospel can be advanced. So be encouraged that Paul knows exactly how we're feeling right now, and hopefully through the prayer of Christians and the church, the bride of Christ, our communities will also grow like Paul's did here in prison. So that was Philippians chapter 1 verses 12 to 18. Tune in next time when we're going to look at verses 19 to 26. Until then, bless you guys, take care.